Okay, thank you for being here. I am Caroline Holke, and today we are going to talk through what is really driving you to drink. I know it's a good topic, isn't it? This is one that kept me stuck for a long time, for sure. Let me give you a little bit of background about me. I am a drink less, live more coach. So, what does that mean? I help smart, successful women get rid of the shitty parts of drinking so that they can create a life that they don't want to numb out of. That's the important part. That's really why this work is important. Yeah, it's great to not have hangovers and eat comfort food when you're not feeling so good and all those kind of things. But really, it's about creating this life that we don't want to numb out of. And that is absolutely possible. So let's talk about for today. If you have any, first of all, if you have any comments, any questions, anything like that, just throw it into the chat and I will answer them as we go through. And then after I go through my session, then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. So that's how we're going to run this thing today. So it drives you a little bit crazy, doesn't it? It's like you wake up in the morning and think, this is it. Like, for real, this is it. I'm not going to drink anymore, or at a minimum, I'm going to cut back. And then you find yourself like almost unwittingly pouring yourself a drink at 5 o'clock. Are we all nodding? Yes, this is totally common. And it can feel a little crazy. It's like you've got this push-pull of, I want it, I don't want it. That's what we call cognitive dissonance. And by the way, that creates a lot of anxiety. So if that helps explain why you're feeling what you're feeling right now. So you know better, but you're not doing better. What's up with this? Today, I want to talk about, what is happening, some of the top reasons that people are quote unquote driven to drink, give you some awareness about what is keeping you stuck in your drinking loop, and then give you some ideas on how to get out. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, I've got some thumbs up, so I'll keep trudging along here. First and foremost, I should have a little bit of a drum roll here, but what are the top reasons that people drink? You think that the reason that you're driven to drink is because it's a stress reliever. You need it to relax. Kind of the same idea right there. Your family, that's a good one. My husband, kids, boss, mother-in-law, what they are doing is driving me crazy. I need a drink to escape this. You deserve it. Again, kind of tied to that stress thing. I work really hard. I look at all these things that I do and all these people I have to put up with. I need a drink. Absolutely. And there are also these kind of ideas of it's the normal thing to do. I mean, let's face it, when we look around, we do live in a drinking society, no question. So there is this prevailing belief that that's the normal thing to do. What about things like it's fun or it's celebratory? I mean, how in the world am I supposed to have a birthday and not have a champagne toast? This is crazy talk here. There's an aspect of sophistication. I have all my different wines and I know all of the different like the undertones and all those kind of things. There are lots of different reasons that people say that they drink, that they're driven to drink. But what's really, really happening in the background is there's a vicious cycle of alcohol. And a vicious cycle is a kind of a self-perpetuating thing. So what happens here is that you've created a drinking habit through repetition of an intense dopamine reward, repeating that over and over and over again, and that creates a desire for alcohol. Okay. There's some moral aspects of alcohol, so we can put anything else in there that you've got a habit on. Okay. You've got this habit. And then one day you decide for whatever reason that you want to drink less or you want to quit drinking or whatever that is. And when you do that, then all of a sudden, unless you have the proper tools, you feel deprived or anxious. And then the negative self-talk kicks in of, there must be something wrong with me, or I'm out of control, or whatever that is. And then guess what? Then you want to escape those feelings and those thoughts. and you drink. And then the next morning you wake up and you're like, well, shit, that didn't work. Like, or maybe it worked temporarily, but now you have those negative thoughts and feelings from yesterday, and they're amplified because you did it again. And so it kind of perpetuates this idea that there's something wrong. And then you want relief from those terrible thoughts and beliefs and all that kind of stuff, and then continue to drink again. I tell this story that for me, I felt like I needed that glass of wine at 5 o'clock because my day had been so shitty. And I had, whether it was I was groggy or hungover, or I procrastinated work because I wasn't feeling 100%, or I made really bad food choices because it was part of my hangover cure, or whatever it was. But my day was so shitty basically because of the wine I'd had the night before. So yeah, the thing that's creating the desire is the alcohol, and the thing that solves for the desire is the alcohol. It's no wonder that people believe it's so powerful. It makes a lot of sense, actually. So what's happening in the background? So we've talked about this vicious cycle. And when we think about it from a neural pathway standpoint, again, just to kind of neutralize it into, this is a habit, this is a, it's an automatic behavior that is living in your primitive brain. We've talked about the first one, which is the habit of drinking, which is when we have an intense dopamine reward coupled with repetition, we get increased desire. Okay, same thing happens with many, many, many other things. Like my son plays video games. There's an intense dopamine reward. He plays it a lot. And so he's got a high desire for video games. I don't. I have no desire for video games. I feel no deprivation there. Interesting to note, right? So we've got that first neural pathway, and then we add on this second one when we try to change it. And that one is created by, it starts with kind of this feeling of deprivation. And then that creates more discomfort and anxiety and fear, and then the negative self-talk. And then, yeah, no wonder we want to escape. Then it creates a desire for alcohol in order to escape. Right? So alcohol is creating a desire for itself. So those are the two neural pathways that are running in the background of this vicious circle here. So how do we get out? What do we do here? Well, it's simple, but not easy. So let me tell you a little bit more about this. I want you to picture, kind of the classic iceberg slide. I don't know, we use that all the time at work, but you've got part of the iceberg is above the water. That's the part you can see, but the majority of it is below the water. So the things that we can do that are above the water are we can address the habit. And there are certain tools and techniques that we can do for sure. This is about deconditioning the desire. Similar to what I said about my son playing video games, right? I have no desire for the video games, so it's really not a big deal. I have no FOMO, none at all. Go for it. Have a great time. But I certainly did not feel the same way about wine. Now I do. So I know it's completely possible. And there was definitely a time when I was in your shoes when I did not believe it was possible. But as long as you have a human brain, then it is. So we can decondition that urge. And what that looks like, and I'll walk you through the steps in a little bit when we go through those tools. But there are some other tools that we can go through that are kind of above the water. I like to think about it. But really what's going on below the water is this whole idea of resistance and fear of change, which is so, 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 so common. And that's with anything. That's not just with alcohol. That could be any sort of change you're trying to go through. But as Louise Hay said, resistance is really the first step to change. It kind of means we're onto something here. It means your primitive brain is like, whoa, you're doing something different. I don't think that's a good idea, because the primitive brain is really designed to conserve energy, and doing something different requires more energy. It requires pulling a lot of activities out of the automated behaviors into the conscious brain. If you ever tried to learn something new, whether it be a language or a musical instrument, whatever that is, it's tiring because you're using your brain differently. So in thinking about the things that are kind of under the surface, that work is about, really addressing this resistance and fear to change, which is so common. And one of the questions that I really like to ask my clients is, how can you love yourself through this change? Now, remember before I talked about the two different neural pathways that we have? That secondary one was, was about escaping the negative self-talk and those negative emotions that came up. So that leads to more drinking. That's why in this case, in addressing this resistance and fear, that's why addressing it with love is so important, with self-compassion, with curiosity. It's not like Drill Sergeant Savage coming in with two metal trash can lids, banging them together, saying, come on, you got to do this. I didn't make that up, by the way. That was my husband's experience in the military. So think about that, like addressing that resistance and fear with different emotions, with love, with compassion, with curiosity. And all of a sudden that opens you up to creating different results for yourself. The other thing that I find really inspiring is starting to focus in on who I want to be on the other side of this change. Like, why am I doing this? Yeah, maybe the health is great, but really, who do I want to become because I have worked through this fear and resistance? That in and of itself can be very powerful. So I've talked a little bit about how the brain works, but at the end of the day, it really is about addressing what's going on in our brain. Because the way to learn or unlearn anything on purpose is by really putting your prefrontal cortex in charge. So the prefrontal cortex is the front part of our brain. That is the part of our brain that makes us human. It's also called the executive part of the brain. It is where all of our long-term hopes and dreams and all that stuff are. It's very, very powerful. But so is our primitive brain, which is in the back. So it's also called the reptilian brain. And that's really in charge of automated behaviors. Likes everything automated. Even if it's bad, just make it automated. That's why we don't have to think too much when we're brushing our teeth or driving the same path to the grocery store or to work or whatever. Those are automated behaviors. And that's good for the primitive brain because that conserves energy. So that's what's going on there. Now we want to engage the prefrontal cortex. And that's so important. Again, as I said earlier, it's simple, but not easy. Okay, so let me give you some tools on how to do that. First and foremost, you want to start getting into a habit of planning your drinks. And what I advise my clients to do is plan out 24 hours in advance. How many drinks are you going to have? 24 hours in advance is really important because that makes sure that you're really incorporating your prefrontal cortex in this discussion. You're not addressing the urge brain that's coming up. Because we already know that we've got that neural pathway that we do, maybe it's you start thinking about drinking on your way home from work or when 5 o'clock hits or whatever that is. That's already like a preconditioned automatic behavior. So we're trying to get out of that by putting the prefrontal cortex in charge. So you plan out your drinks 24 hours in advance. And then you review that right before you're going to start drinking. Like, I want to do this because I've decided this and this is in my long-term interest. And then you want to stick to that plan, not because of the numbers on the plan, but because of who you want to become by sticking to that plan. That was a really powerful distinction for me. And I want to invite you to kind of lean into that and see what difference that makes for you. So that's one thing about the drink plan. Second thing is to allow the urge. What the hell am I talking about, right? So there are 3 things that we can do when an urge comes up. We can give into it and drink, and that just reinforces that neural pathway of drinking. We can resist it. What this looks like is white knuckling it. And it's like pushing it away, pushing it away, pushing it away. My mentor uses the example of trying to hold a beach ball down underneath the water. we can all picture this. Remember this as kids, right? We hold it down and we can hold it down for a little while, but eventually that pressure builds up and it pops up. And guess what? It pops up a lot higher. And this is why, wherever you are on your journey, if you are finding that you're trying to cut back and you're actually finding that you're drinking more than ever, that tells us that you're using that resistance. You were using resistance beforehand. If you think about it as from an energy exchange, like holding that down is giving it more energy. And so it's coming out as a bigger urge. So I said before, we can give in and drink, we can resist it and like push it away, push it away, push it away, make it stronger, or we can allow it. What does that mean? That means, people will talk about like surfing the wave or whatever, all those kind of things. That's exactly what you want to do. But at the front of it, it's like allowing that itch to be there and not scratching it. It's not about freaking out. It's just about having the confidence to know that it's okay. Like this is part of the process. This is part of unwinding. And I want that unwinding. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here watching this video. Things that you can do in this space. I do have a craving hack meditation that is really helpful. So I encourage you to download that from my website. And I'll include the links and everything below here. So there's a craving hack that you can utilize. You can write things down as you're in the moment. I like the image of it's kind of giving my brain something else to do in the moment rather than freaking out. Like observe what's going on. Give it a task. Say, write down what thoughts are coming up. Maybe it's like, I can't handle this. I can't do this. This is so difficult, or how am I going to manage dealing with my family? All these things are going to come up, which is a beautiful thing, actually, because if we think about what drinking is masking, and a lot of people will say, well, I don't know what that is. Well, once you take that substance away, then all that stuff will come up. And that's a good thing, again, because as I mentioned before, the first thing that I do with my clients is that the thing that I do with my clients is I help them create a life that they don't want to numb out of. And we have to understand what's underneath there so that we can address those things. So the other thing is that with allowing an urge is give yourself credit for each one of those urges. You know that saying that everything that we need to know we learned in kindergarten? Think about those gold stars that we used to get in kindergarten. Those gold stars actually are meaningful. Our brain is wired to like rewards, even if it's just a little gold star, even just a tick mark, even if it's like crossing something off of your to-do list. Yeah, I know. That feels good, doesn't it? Okay, so track your urges, your allowed urges. There's a sheet that you can download that I'll provide a link to underneath here when I post this. And you can certainly use that. You can use any form you want. I know that some people will use like a jar and they'll put beads or pretty whatever in there just to represent that's an allowed urge. You don't have to start over from beginning. If you trip up in the meantime, it's the cumulative effect. And you will notice that the more you allow, the easier it'll be. I will tell you from my experience that the first time I truly allowed an urge, everything changed. Everything. I was standing at the kitchen sink and I felt that urge come up. I actually allowed it. I had been trying for a long time. So you'll try a bunch of different things and it won't work. And you'll know that it's not working because of how you're feeling. You'll still feel some anxiety. You'll still feel kind of, when you're actually allowing that urge, it feels much more calm. Even though it's not comfortable, it feels more calm. So the example that I like to use is like with a child. When a child is freaking out in the grocery store, for example, and the parent is like freaking out with the child, it just adds more freak out to the whole situation. It's like throwing gasoline on the fire versus when the child is freaking out and the parent is calm, that helps calm the situation. And that's related in that you can watch the urge, allow that urge from a place of allowing, I'm going to be okay. My body was actually designed to do this. It's lived through 100% of my urges. I may not have, I may give in to a lot of them and I may not love the discomfort, but my body knows how to handle it. So that's the second part. So we've talked about planning your drinks ahead of time, allowing those urges and giving yourself credit, track them. And then the third part is to learn how to uncover and unlearn the thoughts that are creating the desire to begin with. What does that mean? Before I go into that, I want you to consider that I think that it's really interesting that we question all the time. We question our abilities, our past experiences, like what I said to so-and-so, whatever time, but we never question the underlying assumptions. And like, that is, we take it for a given. We take it as a given that we should be ashamed of ourselves because we didn't do it right, or that we're different. And so something must be wrong with us, or normal people drink. These are all just assumptions that we don't question very often. And what I like to do with my clients is teach them how to question those things. Because as soon as we start questioning them, then whoa, like everything changes. So for example, I said before, we're going to learn how to uncover and unlearn the thoughts that are creating the desire to begin with. So you can do this little exercise. What's standing between you and the goal and your goal of what you want your relationship with alcohol to look like? How much do you want to be drinking? Like specifically, do you want to have 2 drinks when you go out on the weekends, 3 weeks or three drinks? You want to drink during the week rather than on the weekends? Do you want to drink whatever it is? I mean, it can be whatever iteration you want, but you have to know specifically what you're driving towards. So what's standing between you and that goal right now? Why do you not have that today? Your brain will want to say, I don't know. So here's how you access that. You go ahead and like write down all the reasons that it's a terrible idea to do that, to drink 2 drinks of wine on the weekends, to quit entirely. I don't know, whatever you want it to be. We want your primitive brain to go ahead and have a hissy fit. Like literally. I'm picturing like the stomp the feet and gnash the teeth, the whole thing. Write those things down. Just take 1 minute. The things that typically come up are, how am I going to have fun? How am I going to socialize? I won't be able to do it. I'm afraid of failure. I don't want people to think badly of me, like that I have a problem. But find that out for yourself. And this is such a critical step because it really reveals to you what's in the way. And once you know what's in the way, then you have your roadmap. We know exactly what to do in order to get there. And that is, we need to start unbelieving them. What that looks like is creating evidence for how these things are not true. And then you create a desire for that. Then it's like, that's what I want. That's what's going to pull me forward. So for example, I don't know how to drink. I don't know how to relax without a drink. Okay. That's what the primitive brain says. That's an obstacle. Now I want to point the brain in the direction of, like with my prefrontal cortex, I want to say, okay, how is it that I am less relaxed when I drink? I know for me, I used to get really argumentative. Sorry, Craig. Definitely more self-conscious. I hear that a lot. What else is it? What other ways show up for you that you're actually less relaxed? Now, certainly that's the case when we look at a bigger lens, when we consider the next day. But what happens in the moment? Like you're probably not connecting as much with your family. because that's kind of what alcohol is doing. So it's not truly relaxing. So what we want to do is create evidence, like point the primitive brain, use the prefrontal cortex consciously to create evidence for how these things are not true, how these obstacles are not true. So for example, what will people think about me? I don't want them to think that I have a problem. Okay, let's ask the question, why would people think better of me? Who's going to think I'm a badass because I've done this? I can't tell you how many people come up to me and they're like, I don't think I could ever do that. I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't either. So shocker. How can I celebrate without a drink? There are a couple of different layers to this one. It's like, why does it matter what's in the drink or what's in the cup about the celebration? What makes it celebratory? How is celebrating better without a drink, without drinking alcohol? How am I able to better connect with the people around me? How am I better able to be present and actually enjoy what's happening here? Sometimes people will say, how can I handle spending time with my family or going to these events without a drink? Okay, there's the question of why are we doing this in the first place? Because if you have to drink in order to enjoy it, then, why are we doing it in the first place? But again, this is one, how can I handle my family better? How can I show up in a better place when I'm not drinking? Again, I'm more conscious, I'm more present, I'm less argumentative, less whatever that is. Another one, I'm afraid of the withdrawals I face after daily wine drinking. So this is a question that came in. I'm assuming that these are emotional withdrawals. Notice there's a physical withdrawal. There can be a physical withdrawal, that can be dangerous. So you want to talk to a doctor about that. Those physical symptoms should be like at the max case would be gone within the first 7 to 10 days. So in this case, we're talking about emotional withdrawals. That goes back to the discussion about the desire. I have a desire for this. I don't want to feel deprivation. So in that case, I would recommend looking at what habits have I broken in the past. There have been times before where I didn't think I could do something and I did. I like using the example of that person you dated in high school who was like your first love, who you never thought that you would like live without. And you have. In fact, you probably ended up in a much happier place now. But there was a time when you didn't believe it. And you have now believed something different. And I invite you to just consider how powerful that is. Like, what if I'm wrong about this? What if I'm wrong about how this is the only way I can have fun? Then what happens? That eliminates that obstacle right there. So that is the material that I have prepared for you today. If you want more of this, I invite you to please sign up for my free Stop Over Drinking course that's on my website. It is delivered to you via email. There are some videos and some worksheets that will help you walk through kind of these fundamental tools that will help you practice these things on a day-to-day basis, along with some support from me. So I'll include some links below so that you have that information. And of course, I'm available if you want to talk with me, just if you hit a snag, any of that stuff. Happy to do that. So that's what I have for you today. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and answer some questions as they come up. Thank you.